This is episode 6 of She Doesn't Know, where I talk about neuroscience, creative obsession, and a few questions for God. I've always felt like I experienced childhood a little differently from most people. While most kids were trying to fit in, I was watching, observing, and absorbing everything around me. And I especially noticed these things as an introverted kid. I was deeply curious about how adults behaved, how people interacted, what they feared, what they hid. I really dove pretty deep into those things, and I didn't quite belong because I saw clearly everything while other people couldn't see it. From early on, I knew I was creative. I loved to write, draw, imagine, perform, but the world, especially school, didn't seem to value that. Teachers would tell me my essays lacked a moral, as if every story needed a tidy conclusion to be valid. I once told them it doesn't have a moral, it's just a story. That honestly got me a B- instead of an A. That was the pattern, and it kept repeating. Every time I expressed myself differently, the system penalized me for it. They called me a failure. They said I was too different. I broke the rules. I just didn't care about the system, or I was a bad child. It's so important to recognize as an adult that you should never make a child feel guilty or ashamed for being who they are. And if I drew outside the lines, I was wrong. If I questioned the point of rule, I was labeled difficult. If I didn't memorize, but I imagined instead, I was told that I would never succeed. At home, things were different. I had the freedom to explore through art, writing, theater, and film. My creativity was encouraged, but outside that space, it was mocked. People made fun of how I dressed, how I thought, even how I spoke. It's only years later that I realized I wasn't a bad student, I was just different, and I was a different kind of learner. I was probably neurodivergent. I learned through visuals, people, stories, experiences, not through note memorization. And I'm not alone. There's millions of kids in India just like me. Deeply creative, intuitively brilliant, but systematically they are discouraged. Our current education system was built for an industrial age to produce workers who follow instructions, not thinkers who create new paths. Creativity is treated like an extracurricular hobby, not a foundational skill. Children who don't fit in the mold, especially neurodivergent ones, are made to feel broken. They're told to shrink. They're never encouraged to shine. They are forced to conform to the system that mistakes difference for failure. This doesn't just damage confidence, it damages the economy. Because when you suppress creativity, you suppress innovation. When you don't teach kids how to think, only what to think, you create a workforce that can execute but not imagine. I believe the future creative economy depends on rethinking how we teach. We need to redesign our education system from the ground up to nurture creative divergent thinking and not punish it. Here's what I would implement. Introducing modules on storytelling, design thinking, system thinking, creative problem solving, behavioral psychology from early on. Let children explore why things don't work, not just how they work, why they don't work, what failure really means. Encourage interdisciplinary learning, art with science, business with literature, music with technology, because I've never understood why those subjects are separate, because everything is interconnected. Science is interconnected with English, English is interconnected with history, so why should we be taught these subjects separately? Schools should have trained facilitators who understand ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and other neurodivergent traits, not treat them like disabilities. Create multiple modes of learning: visual, auditory, social, experiential. Replace rigid grading with growth-based evaluation, measuring curiosity, persistence, empathy, and imagination. Let's just move away from isolated studying. Create spaces for collaboration, group projects, debates, community, art, field experiments where kids can learn through interaction and shared activity. Introduce creative apprenticeship in high school, real exposure to creative careers. What are the possibilities in creative careers like film, design, brand strategy, art direction, entrepreneurship? We need to teach these things before kids just go and decide that they want to be a fine artist and then they don't know how to monetize on it. Because that's where the real trouble arises. And then they start feeling ashamed of, what they're really good at, which is creativity and art. Because they've never been taught how to correctly channel that and turn that into a money-making business. Let kids learn directly from working professionals. Build ecosystems between schools and creative studios. Teach mindfulness, creative meditation, cognitive exercises that enhance neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and form new connections. Reforming isn't about producing artistic kids. It's about building the foundation of India's future economy. This leads to founders, innovators who build new industries instead of just filling jobs. This drives innovation in design, AI, sustainability, and cultural production, creates brands, media, storytelling that represents India globally, with authenticity, not imitation. Tap into the talent of neurodivergent and underrepresented children, expanding our creative force forward. The world's fastest growing economies, from South Korea to Japan to the US, invested in creative education early on. India's tech boom can only go so far without a cultural one. And we can't keep producing coders without creators, engineers without dreamers, and consumers without original thinkers. I want to help build a new kind of creative education, one that celebrates differences, nurtures imagination, teaches kids not just how to work, but how to think, create, contribute. Because every child who feels different isn't broken. They're a prototype of the future. And the future of India's creative economy depends on whether we learn to see that.